Hey everyone, welcome back to some new malicious compliance stories, where people comply to the letter, but not the spirit of a request. I hope you had a great day. The first story is called 25 per kilometer. I used to work as a computer technician. My employer was very stubborn during the hiring process and clearly said that I would be using my own vehicle and would be paid no more than 25 cents for each kilometer traveled. Well, no, I didn't argue with him at all. I said that is a fair price and I'm eager to start. What he didn't know was that I had a moped and that I carried all my tools in my backpack. 25 cents per kilometer traveled would not only cover my work costs, but all of my personal costs too. I went on a lot of mountain drives on the employer's wallet. Speaking of which, I was surprised about how pleasant life is when you have infinite kinetic energy. The next story is called A Lot of Trouble for Them. I used to work for a big warehouse for inventory management. From the first day I noticed that our workflow is super slow due to old software used for the office and warehouse. Since I wanted to impress my boss and my coworkers, I used some of my free time to write new web-based software that you can even use on your phone. This was super convenient because it allowed my boss, the sales team and others to literally work while going around the warehouse or while working from home. Even the warehouse staff was impressed, since I asked them what they need to see when picking orders. This software was now the heart of the company, and during my time I worked there, it was used a lot and replaced our old software. My old boss was about to retire, and together with the new boss, we all met in the warehouse, had cake and got to know the new boss, who I'll call Eric. He was super nice to everyone, but the next day he showed his true colors. He completely changed our workflow, requested useless stuff from the sales team, added shifts, morning, day and night, to our warehouse workers, and got rid of stuff we barely sell. Within weeks we were all exhausted. 3 people quit. Then Eric came into my office and gave me my 2 weeks notice. I was actually shocked. His response was, "We have 3 IT guys, we don't need that many." On my last day at work, Eric came into my office, looked around and said, "Please make sure to reset your PC and delete any personal data." Now there's one thing Eric doesn't know. The software always checks for a local file on my PC. So if the software can't find that file or the checksum is wrong, it will display an error and shut down. I asked him again, "You want me to delete every personal file from this PC?" His reply was, "Yes, within the next hour." Cue malicious compliance. I made sure to delete the whole source code of my software, deleted some personal stuff and cleaned my mail folder. And shortly before I was about to leave, I pressed delete on the file required for the software. As soon as I left the building, I saw people standing outside, having a break. While I walked to my car, a warehouse worker told me that the whole warehouse is on pause due to some server issues. I made sure to leave as fast as possible. 1 hour later, Eric blew off my phone, demanding the source code from my software. I happily told him that per contract, the software is my property. My old boss even wrote a contract, and that he won't get the source code. He demanded I come into the office and fix everything. "I'm sorry, I don't work for you anymore. You wanted me to delete all personal data. The key for the software is also my own file, so I had to delete that too." I heard from some of my friends there that Eric had to buy a license for the old software, and within 3 weeks he was replaced by another boss. The third story is called Follow the Rules. I drive trucks, and I was doing a job that just wouldn't get done if everybody followed all the red tape. It's kind of the place where you sign all of the paperwork stating you will do it this way. But the reality is you can't. But that's fine, because the paperwork is there just to protect the company from legal recourse. Now, I'm not saying we all did dangerous stuff, but you know, it was just little things that made your work a little easier and more efficient. Well, all of a sudden, the company started to enforce every policy. What really annoyed me though was that you never knew which policy they had decided to start enforcing until you got asked to see a manager. And then they told you that you were being put on performance review because you had been observed on CCTV. What was more annoying was the supervisors would report you for something petty, but then the next day be asking you and expecting you to do something that was far more dangerous and risky than the thing they reported you for. You'd be reported and put on the performance review for leaving your keys in the truck for a few minutes on Tuesday. But then on Thursday you'd be expected to use a tail lift in a public area, with people walking under the lift with a 1-ton pallet on it. Despite the fact that the company policy states that tail lift should only be used outside of store opening hours. So I started to follow the rules explicitly. My daily hours went from being around 10 to around 12 or 13. But my ultimate screw you came when they decided all PPE had to be signed out by upper management. Before this change, they had a cupboard full of stuff like gloves and steel toe cap boots. If you needed something, you just asked the supervisor, and you'd have a new pair of boots within a few minutes. Well, on a Friday, I noticed my boots had broken, and the sole was separating from the boot. I left for work on Saturday morning, telling my wife that I would probably be coming home because I knew upper management only worked Monday to Friday, so no new PPE could be provided. Sure enough, after showing the supervisors and manager on duty my boots, they couldn't get me any. They spent about an hour trying to find me some, but eventually told me I would have to go home without pay. I told them that I've turned up to work and that I'm willing to work, but it's the company's responsibility to provide their staff with PPE, and that it isn't my fault if they can't provide any. After a while of refusing to back down, the manager went to go call someone in the legal department. He returned saying I would be sent home for the weekend with full pay, and some new boots would be provided to me on Monday. Then one of the supervisors told me that I should tape the boot up with tape, and that if I didn't, he'd report me to upper management. I also put in a grievance about this conversation, and the supervisor was suspended from duties involving other members of staff. The thing is, before the company started to get petty, on Saturday morning I would have just set off for work 30 minutes earlier and got some cheap boots myself on the way to work, but they eroded any goodwill I had left and I was past the point of caring. I had a nice weekend though. The next story is called Neighbor Trouble. We had a speculation home built with a $12 million budget and a 16-month schedule. The next door neighbor immediately qualified as a complete douche. Knows everybody, including the principals of the company I work for. At the very beginning of the work, he asked for a row of redwood trees to be planted as screening between the properties. Principals grant his request as a good neighbor gesture, $31K. At every step of the project, he either stands out at the end of the drive taking pictures or he's flying his drone over the lot. He starts asking questions about whether or not work in progress is covered under the permit. He confides that he has obtained a copy of the permit and a set of plans. One day he asks us for a meeting to discuss the redwood trees. Yes, those trees. He comes over at the appointed time and introduces his wife's landscape architect, a famous guy apparently. He tries pulling some muscle moves by trying to convince us that the redwood trees are stealing their water. They also don't fit his vision for the project they are considering, which will be a total side and backyard makeover with walkways, stone walls, mountains, etc. He wants mature oak trees instead. Cut down and remove the redwoods at our expense and plant new oak trees, also at our expense, because, you know, screening. We decline, which sends the famous architect guy and the wife into a rage. They decide to move forward with their project anyway, and the major earth moving, concrete forming, irrigation etc. are all getting place. Mr. Drone Guy continues to make efforts to get the oak trees swapped in, under threats that maybe some of the work we are doing isn't covered under the permit. Seems he also acted as the GC for his own remodel, so he must really know what he's talking about. He sends emails and registered letters from his lawyer, all in an effort to get us to swap out the trees. Finally, we are within sight of completing our project. From the second floor, we can see that they have really transformed their whole yard into little parklets with mature planting and walkways and all the other stuff. It's impressive. So, I called the town for a courtesy inspection prior to the final one. The next day, the inspector, an old friend whose father is also an old friend, stops by to tour the property for any red flags. I save the best for last and we make it upstairs and make it to the best possible viewing point of the neighbor's magnificent landscape project. My inspector friend casually but loudly says, "What the heck is all that? I never saw a permit come through for all that." And he bounced downstairs and heads back to the office. I'm guessing to pull files. We always perform abutting property searches as due diligence. We discovered that the neighbor's side yard in its entirety is an 80-foot wide utility easement for the single largest underground water aqueduct in the entire region. Can't be built on, but we kept shut about it. Now, because there is also a seasonal creek that crosses said easement, Fish and Game are notified of the work in progress. We now have the State Water Resources Board and the major water utility company inspections and enforcement department making inquiries along with the town building department. No permit application was ever submitted for any of the work Mr. Drone Guy had done. Our property was sold. During some modifications for the new owner, we watched with glee as every stick and stone was removed from the offending area and was to be left in a natural state for eternity. Major fines were also levied. The last story is called Look More Often. I work at my local college's lab pool. We open the pool at 1, but we usually have to be clocked in and set up by 12:30, so basically just like a regular job. The one thing I love about this job is how easygoing it is. We have 3 people working the whole day, one of them being a head lifeguard. The thing that makes this job so easy is that we do 20-minute rotations per stand. Today I got on the stand when a regular came in. This guy is known to ask out our lifeguards and acts really creepy towards female staff and swimmers. I was only on stand for about 5 minutes before he comes up to me and says, in a really rude tone, "Can you look at me more often? I feel unsafe." And I reply, "Sure," in the nicest way I could muster. He gives me the stink eye and continues swimming. As he's swimming, I am bug-eyed staring at him. He swims for another 5 to 10 minutes before he leaves. I guess I made him uncomfortable. 30 minutes go by, and my supervisor walks in and calls me over. Apparently, he sent her an email complaining about me staring at him and making him feel unsafe and uncomfortable. I apologized to my manager and explained that he just gets on the staff's nerve and makes them feel uncomfortable. Thankfully, she watched the whole encounter on our security cameras and thought it was really funny. She totally understood. Thanks for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please don't forget to leave a like, comment and subscribe. And if you have time, watch another one of my videos. And now, I hope you have a great day. Stay safe. Bye bye.